Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Sidebar Social. I'm Jennifer Grinke.
And I'm Dana Stewart, your co-host, as you said in the last episode.
I'm glad you know that.
Yeah, I know my role. Okay.
You do.
All right, everybody, you're going to want to stay tuned for this episode because we're going to be talking about divorce, and particularly the stages of divorce, but as it relates to you emotionally. And the underlying concept there is that it's all about grief.
Yeah.
You don't feel grief though, right?
No, I don't.
Yeah, you need to teach a class on that. Yeah, how to just be like.
I probably need help.
Yeah, probably. Well, guess what? We have a returning guest who can help you get in touch with your emotions. So we want to welcome Kathleen Schofield. Welcome back to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate it.
So you are the first returning guest we've had on the show.
Yes.
I feel so special.
You should feel special. Yeah. So how have you been?
Good, busy. How have you guys been?
Yeah, making the world single.
I'm here.
We're still doing that.
And I'm trying to make them sane.
Yes, yeah, it's a good combo that we're
single and sane.
Perfect. So, all right, we want to get into it. Let's just jump right in. So we have a lot of clients that you help us with. We work in conjunction with one another. People going through divorce, they are emotionally upset. Sometimes we can tell from the first meeting, or it may be down the road. We're like, we need to call Kathleen. We get on the red phone, direct dial to Kathleen to help. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Who are you going to call? It's you.
Little exorcism of those demons.
But for real, you have helped so many of our clients and us too kind of work through the grief of divorce. So I think I just want to turn it over to you and let you start just kind of sharing some insight, and then we'll just dive into this process and help educate the viewers.
Well, thank you. First off, it's so important that there is a team collaborative approach. You know, you really can't navigate divorce and the post-divorce healing that comes with that without having that support system around you.
Yeah.
You know, both legally and mentally and emotionally. And I love that you guys are saying and recognizing that it's grief, because divorce is one of those rare moments in our life, rare decisions where it's going to change absolutely everything. And it isn't just grieving the loss of the person that you're in the relationship with or the marriage with. It's, grieving the loss of how things are going to change, what life you have currently and the way that it, is playing out. But it also is going to change the future. You're going to grieve the loss of the potential, what you thought things were going to be, where you thought you were going. So it's really layered and complex and multifaceted grief. And so when we start to view it in that way, we're actually grieving as we're making the decision, and it's a tough decision. It really is going to spider web everywhere, and moving through some of those stages and those phases, it mirrors the stages and phases and chapters of grief. Anger, sadness, depression, loss, bargaining. How about shock and disbelief? How many times do you sit down with your client and you share something and there's shock and disbelief about how the law is, or what their co-parents or soon-to-be ex is doing, And a lot of times what's really challenging is two people are in different places in the processing and the experience of grief. Maybe one is sad, one is mad, and then you've really got some fireworks as they're, kind of navigating the divorce process.
Yeah, we see that with I don't know who I learned this from, but the emotional readiness scale.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Typically, they're not at the same place. And a lot of times you talk about the shock. We'll get a client who, a lot of times it's the male, which I don't know if this is like just an indictment on men not being as emotionally in tune, but I've had a lot of men who are like, I never saw this coming. Like I had no idea we had problems.
Yeah.
And then they're having the process. I feel like for me, those stages, the shock seems to be something that I see frequently as kind of that first stage they're going through.
Mm-hmm. I think also I didn't realize my partner was as far along, the timeline of making that decision as they were. And so then you've got some of the bargaining, that we see in grief, in trying to change what's happening or kind of make that, that last ditch effort, when the other person is really far down the timeline, and kind of, closer to the acceptance part of just that decision.
Yeah, the bargaining, well, if I just do this, or if I change just one thing, then maybe we can work it out. But how do you see it from your therapeutic eyes? Because that's my layman's terms for it.
That's great. When we're looking at making, repair in relationships, slow change is lasting change. And so that quick change, that is not meaningful change. That's not deep, insightful, change that, where the person is actually recognizing and having that insight and awareness. And a lot of times that's kind of part of the yo-yo effect, where we make a decision based on the other person's behaviors instead of, where we are at, what we need, how we feel, and what's going on within the family system. So slow change is lasting change. That quick it's going to revert back to original patterns and behaviors.
Kathleen, you talked about the different stages of grief. Is that the same for everyone? Is it like a linear roadmap that we can tell the viewers, hey, here's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3?
Great question, and I wish. Honestly, it's not a linear process. It's not we start at one and we move into the other. We are going to go in and out of different phases, maybe sadness, loss, anger. Anger is a big one that I think is a little bit more prevalent,
we see the most,
in the divorce process. And you're going to go in and out. Or here's the other, good point to make. A lot of times it's multiple emotions at the same time. And I think, if we look in adulthood, that is what ends up happening. I feel multiple emotions about the same thing at the same time. And that can be really overwhelming. And you want to be able to sit there and parse through, hey, I'm angry right now, I'm sad right now, I'm resentful, I'm frustrated, I'm all of these things, and I need to get that intensity down in order to continue to be able to move forward. So you're going to go in and out of that both during the divorce process and then post-divorce, for a period of time, definitely.
Yeah, it's difficult to expect a client to make decisions about their children or property division when they're feeling multiple emotions. They feel stuck. And that's where I feel like we bring you in and you help them navigate that. What does that process look like for you? We call you, say we need help. How do you approach that with the client?
So I think it really depends on where the client is at. Are we in the discernment process where we're trying to make the decision? And that's where I'm walking the person through what's happened, how they're feeling, their experience, and we are exploring what's best for the family system. If they've made the decision and we're going through the divorce, then, and I think you put it best, because I said the divorce process is a marathon, but what was the thing?
Oh, yeah. So I usually will tell clients that it has the emotional intensity of running a sprint, but the longevity of running a marathon.
Yes, and that's the perfect way to put it. So it's
Let's put that
kind
on
of
a
like,
t-shirt.
Yeah.
I'll wear it. No.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times clients are coming in and it is just like a dumping ground of everything that's happening in the divorce process. And so I give them a really safe space to say, hey, tell me what's going on. Tell me how you're feeling. Give me a temperature check. I validate the way that they're feeling. The other one is heavily normalize it. Hey, this is really, really hard. It's really painful. You're going to get through it, kind of building their confidence.
Yeah.
Because the healing really doesn't start until after the litigation, process is completed and that decree is signed. So the other piece, and I'm sure you guys are going to appreciate this, I really try and decrease and manage the intensity of their emotions so there's not impulsivity. That's a huge problem in the divorce
We
process.
appreciate you.
Yeah, because when I am angry, and here's another piece, this feels so unfair. How is this going this
hear that
way?
a lot.
I have a whole story, and this is unjust. This is unfair. And then we want to act and react in a way that ultimately it's not good for us emotionally. It's also not great if there are kids involved. So really trying to manage those impulses, reset expectations, but also give them such a safe space to just openly process what's going on. And in that way, they feel like, hey, okay, I can go back out after this session and I can deal with this.
Yeah.
I can take this on. I'm going to get through it. It is going to get better. And there's a piece of hope as well, because at the end of the grief cycle, hopefully we're to a place of acceptance, but it's going to take us a minute to get there. And it's a long process, right?
Yeah.
It's not like all of a sudden we're going to make this decision and tomorrow I'll be divorced. It's a long process.
Fair is the 4-letter F word we don't use in family law. So yeah, we
Yeah.
have sometimes have to.
Yeah.
We deal with that a lot, actually. As
we
Jen
do.
said, it's probably the most common thing.
Yeah,
Well, there's
it's not
actually
fair.
a bias. It's called the just world bias. And at different points in our life, we are encountering situations that aren't fair, that aren't okay, or that maybe we're not going to see justice served, or we're not going to see fairness rendered. And really, you have to sit. And again, it's the complicated mix of emotions to say, hey, this isn't fair, but I still know that I'm going to get to the other side and I'm going to be okay. I'm going to heal on the other end of this.
Follow us and join the conversation on Instagram and YouTube at Sidebar Social. Have you had clients where they have that light bulb moment, like, hey, what I'm feeling is actually okay. It's actually grief. And this is like a process that I need to go through.
Yes. I think it's pretty understandable in the midst of all of this that, someone going through divorce wouldn't quantify or classify it as grief. And the minute you start to explain it and say, hey, have you thought about it in this way? They're able to understand a bit more where they're at and kind of validate their experience for themselves. And I think it's so much easier to manage something if you really know what it is that you're going through. I think that probably some of our more intense, emotional and psychological experiences come in a very unexpected way. I didn't know it was going to go like this. I didn't know it was going to feel like this. And when you start to really validate and put that label on it of, hey, it is grief, but it's going to be a different type of grief, not what you would experience in like the actual death of someone, but using grief to quantify the loss, and the complicated loss, it does help. It helps people a lot.
Yeah.
So they recognize, or at some point, that it's grief. What have you seen time frame wise for how long it takes them to then work through that grief?
Ooh, I think in the way that grief is for a loss of a loved one, you always look back at that and say, wow, that was really tough. I never want to experience that again. So it's always there a little bit. I would say the active grief definitely, consists through the divorce process, but the healing really doesn't begin until you close that chapter, until you get to the end of litigation or the divorce decree is signed or your mediated settlement agreement is signed, and then you can start the active part of healing. And the ambiguity of that, unfortunately, is how long the legal process takes. If it takes a long time, you're going to be in that active stage of grief, probably a little bit predominantly mad versus sad, but you're not really able to heal yet because you're still running that marathon. But once that decree is signed, which is bittersweet, honestly, a lot of clients really think, oh, I'm going to feel so good signing it. And in reality, it's another wave of grief that's activated that is often really surprising. I can't believe I was actually that sad when I signed. Yes. And I always prepare people to go, hey, you think you're going to be like, running at this thing with the pen, like so relief. And you do feel a little bit of that it's over, but it is still sad. And so you have to, kind of remember there are certain things that are going to reactivate that grief. And the more you can know that and expect it, the better you're going to be able to handle it. But then we get into what I call the year of firsts, which is I'm going to do everything for the first time. And this is not starting at separation, because in separation, you're still in that like limbo period of working through it. It's really once the decree is signed, you start that year of firsts where I'm doing everything a different way for the very first time.
Yeah.
And if you have children, you're kind of playing both roles of parents. And sometimes you have to learn new skills and do it pretty quickly in the midst of healing from all of this grief and loss for how much your life has changed. So you have all these firsts that you're doing them in a different way. And sometimes it's pretty painful. It's pretty sad. And then the other emotion that I hear a lot is guilt and shame. Especially if you have children. I'm doing all of these things for the first time. I don't feel very confident. I don't feel very comfortable. I'm still healing. And I feel guilty, being a single parent and being out and having that be a parent and kind of my new normal.
So the year of first, things like birthdays,
Christmas.
holidays. I knew you'd say Christmas. Yeah, it's the only thing she cares about, holiday-wise.
I like Christmas.
Even I would imagine even like
Scrooge. I don't-
even like first day of school maybe, or last day of school.
Yes. Also, things that happen on the weekend, maybe like tournaments, sporting events, maybe how am I going to feel when I see my co-parent at these things, awards, I mean, there's so many things that happen in that year of first that you're navigating in a completely different way while still being in pain.
So during that year of first,
Mhm.
we've had clients who want to buy a house.
Yep.
They get out right away from the divorce.
Get married.
They want to get married. They start dating somebody. What's your insight on big life changes outside of the divorce, which is a major life change, like doing multiple life changes at once?
That's a lot. I tend to like my clients to slow down a little bit, to be thoughtful, to refrain from being too impulsive or to put a Band-Aid on it. Hey, this would make me feel so much better. You're not the same person that you were prior to your marriage when, back in the dating phase, you're different. And I really want my clients to find meaning and growth in the healing from the divorce process, which definitely comes with getting to know yourself again, understanding yourself, redefining or, your self-confidence, your self-esteem, and that takes time. And especially with the dating, a lot of people do want to rush and date again, which can be all right as long as it's very slow. But you need to be able to look back in your marriage and say, what was my part in this? What do I need to do differently? What do I want differently in another person?
To learn more about Greinke Stewart Family Law, visit greinkestuartlaw.com.
All right, Kathleen, I'm going to shift and play mental health professional for a moment and ask you a question. All right, I have observations here. I want to see if you agree with me. So I've had a lot of clients who I feel like didn't actually do the work that you're talking about and process what they're feeling. They get divorced, and shortly thereafter, they're telling me, hey, I'm engaged, I'm getting married. And I feel like from the outside looking in, they're maybe trying to mask some of the pain or conceal. They end up getting married pretty quickly. And I don't even know if it's that the new person is that much greater. It's just different than what they were used to. And then I've had multiple clients contact me a year or so later. I need another divorce. And I'm just curious, do you think that's maybe an accurate observation that people are kind of masking the pain or not self-reflecting enough?
Yeah, I think we could say that would be an unhealthy coping, mechanism or strategy, kind of a Band-Aid. Definitely, if you don't do some of this deeper, more insightful work to become more, accountable and, kind of leading towards that change, you're going to pick that baggage up and you're just going to move it down the timeline. And ultimately, you end up going towards something very similar, than what you previously had, but again, isn't that still pretty unhealthy? It's going to lead to a similar outcome. You're going to engage in a lot of the same patterns because you really didn't learn from any of that, especially if, coming out of a marriage, you're saying, well, it's all my ex's fault. Everything, I'm fine, I'm perfect. And in reality, it always takes two to contribute to the demise of a marriage. And I think there's strength in actually looking inward to say, hey, I want something different. And that means that I've got to first heal as me and understand what different really needs to look like. Is that scary? Absolutely. But it will give you the opportunity to have something very different in the future, especially since you're going to gravitate towards someone different, which is what you really need in order to have a future healthier relationship.
I just think it's such a new concept that we're actually able to kind of put a label on what these people are experiencing. Because for so long, they're just looked at like that person's just angry or that person's crazy or they're a narcissist, the word we hear all the time.
Yes.
But to me, the fact that we're able to recognize, hey, this person's actually going through the grief cycle and send them to you is going to be life-changing for some of these people.
I hope so. I hope it's more validation than anything, and then normalizing. Because if you're sitting here going, I am 5 things at once right now, and then you're right, we reach for pretty terrible dismissive words like, I must be crazy. I'm doing this wrong. I'm so sensitive. I'm so this. And no one heals out of that because you feel what you feel, and then if there's no understanding, you're going to stuff it down or dismiss it or make negative statements about yourself. Well, that's not going to help build you up after this either. I think just owning where you're at and recognizing what it is and having that insight is one of the first steps towards change and healing and growth. I think, isn't that what Viktor Frankl says? We find meaning through hard times. Well, that's because we look at it and we choose to grow and evolve and change out of it. Now, it's the harder process, right? It'd be so much easier to go and, get another spouse or date around or, go kind of crazy or, whatnot as far as impulsivity is concerned. The harder way actually leads to the longevity of contentment, both as a single person, but then in your future relationship.
Yeah.
By the way, there's a round 2 of processing divorce that I don't.
Round 2.
And this is
cliffhanger.
something that is not talked about. There's certain problems that you need to work through as a single person, but then there's other problems that only arise in your next serious relationship, where all of a sudden emotions are at play. You could get hurt. We have feelings for someone. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait. Some of the feelings coming from the previous marriage,
Yeah.
they will present themselves in your first serious relationship. And I hear clients go, well, I thought I already did this work. I did this work when I was single. Like, why is this coming back up again? Well, because these are newer problems that will only be there in a serious relationship. That's why I want people to take the time to heal a little bit in that year of first, because I know there's a round 2 coming, when you're in your first relationship, serious one, and there's actual real feelings involved. And
Yeah.
the possibility that you could get hurt again pops up and it reactivates some of that grief.
Yeah. The vulnerability, the
Yeah.
trust.
Oh, yeah.
I could definitely
Yeah.
see that coming up again.
Yes. So people, get very, kind of surprised at that. And I'm like, I always want everyone to be expected. No, you've got a round 2 coming and another set of, issues as a new couple is coming together to try and figure out how are we going to communicate in a healthy way? How are we going to help each other through this? So
But the good news is you're there to help them work through it.
I try.
Yeah.
And we'll be sending them to you.
Yeah.
Well, likewise, those referrals go back and forth.
Well, we appreciate you coming back on again. And for those who did not see your first appearance, that's episode 4 of the podcast. So you can go back and check that one out. You shared a lot of wisdom on that one
A
too.
lot about co-parenting.
Yes, yes.
That's the hardest part, right?
Great information.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, thank you again for coming on, for all the work you do helping our clients move forward in
Thank
this
you.
grief process.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next time on Sidebar Social.